You found this story on a night you probably should have been doing something else. That means something. If this hits you, if you feel it, don't just scroll past. Share it with one person who needs a good story tonight. Drop a comment, even just a single word. And if you're not subscribed yet, you're going to regret it by the end of the day. Because what's coming? Nobody sees it coming. The reservation was made 3 weeks in advance. Table for one. Corner booth. Window facing the street. His name, not his real name, but the name people used when they wanted something from him, was on the list. Enzo Cavalieri arrived at 8:47 p.m. No conva. No earpiece. No men in the shadows pretending to look at their phones. Tonight was his decision, and his decision was simple. One dinner. One glass of wine. Alone. He was 42 years old, and he had never once eaten his birthday meal in peace. Tonight, he told himself, would be different. The hostess looked up from her podium when he walked in. She was young, mid-20s, practiced smile, the kind of eyes that assess people the moment they step through the door. She looked at his coat. His jaw. The way he moved. Her smile didn't fall. It just stopped working. Name? She said. Cavalieri. She looked at her screen. Scrolled. Looked again. I'm sorry. She said it the way people say it when they're not. I don't see anything under that name. Check again. She didn't. Sir, we're fully booked this evening. I'm going to have to ask you to. I made this reservation. His voice was quiet. That was the thing about Enzo Cavalieri that most people never understood until it was too late. He was never louder when he was angry. He got quieter. 3 weeks ago. Corner booth. The hostess straightened. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. Behind her, through the warm gold light and the low hum of expensive conversation, he could see the corner booth. Empty. Pristine white tablecloth. A single candle burning for no one. He looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned, pushed back through the door, and walked out into the rain. Nobody followed him. Nobody came after him. He stood on the wet pavement, rain tapping the shoulders of his black coat, and he almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was exactly what he should have expected. 42 years old, and some things never changed. He had walked half a block when he heard her. Sir, wait. Please. Something in the word please made him turn. Not the desperation in it. He'd heard desperation his whole life and it had never once moved him. It was the fact that it didn't sound desperate at all. It sounded almost annoyed. Like she was doing him a favor and he was making it difficult. The waitress was standing in the rain without a coat. Burgundy vest, white shirt, dark hair pulling loose from its clip. She'd come out so fast she hadn't grabbed anything. Rain was already dotting her shoulders. Your table is ready, she said. I was just told there was no reservation. There was a mix-up. She said it without blinking. It happens. I'm sorry for the wait. It was a lie. He knew it was a lie. She knew he knew. Either of them acknowledged it. She simply turned and walked back toward the entrance, and after a moment that surprised even him, he followed. She didn't take him to the corner booth. She took him past the bar, past the good tables, past the soft lighting and the low jazz, and she sat him at table 17, a two-top near the kitchen door. He could hear the clatter of dishes. The heat from the kitchen pressed against the back of his neck. 2 servers nearly bumped into him on their way past. He looked at the table. Then at her. Best seat in the house, she said, completely straight-faced. He almost laughed. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. She brought him water. Then bread he didn't order. Then a glass of wine he didn't ask for but which turned out to be exactly what he would have chosen. He noticed that. He didn't say anything about it. For 20 minutes, Enzo Cavalieri sat alone near a kitchen door in the worst seat in the restaurant and felt something close to peace. Then she came back. She set down a single cupcake. Chocolate. 1 candle, 2 actually, One had bent sideways during the walk over. Both were lit. She didn't sing. She didn't make a scene. She just stood there with her hands clasped in front of her and said quietly, "Someone told me it's your birthday." He looked at the cupcake for a long moment. "You didn't have to do that." "No," she agreed. "I didn't." He leaned forward to blow out the candles. And that was the exact moment the window shattered. Not the window beside him, the one across the room. The corner booth. The empty, pristine, white tablecloth corner booth where he was supposed to be sitting exploded inward in a single violent crack of glass and silence. Then the screaming started. Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. That was the thing about real danger that movies always got wrong. It didn't make people scatter immediately. It froze them. Turned them into statues with wide eyes and open mouths, minds trying to catch up with something that had no business happening in a place like this. Then someone screamed properly, and the room collapsed into chaos. Plates hit the floor. Chairs scraped back. A woman near the bar dropped to her knees. A man in a suit grabbed his wife and pushed her toward the back wall like he'd been trained for it, which told Enzo something about that man he hadn't expected to learn tonight. Enzo didn't move. He sat at table 17 with both hands flat on the cloth and his eyes on the corner booth. The candle on the cupcake was still burning. A thin ribbon of smoke curled up from the one that had blown out in the blast of air. The shot had come from across the street. High angle. Through glass. Professional. Elena had dropped low behind the service counter the moment it happened. She hadn't run. She hadn't screamed. She'd gone low and stayed still. He respected that more than he could explain. Within 4 minutes, the black SUVs arrived, 3 of them, sliding through the rain without urgency, which was somehow more frightening than sirens. They parked at angles that sealed the street. Men in dark coats moved quickly and quietly, the way men move when they've done something many times before. The restaurant was locked down before the first police car appeared. Phones were collected at the door. Not asked for, collected. A man with a calm face and a very specific kind of stillness walked table to table, held out a black bag, and people placed their phones inside without being told twice. The manager looked like he wanted to object. He didn't. Enzo finally stood. He straightened his coat and walked slowly through the frozen room toward his head of security, a broad, quiet man named Dario who had appeared from nowhere the way Dario always did. "The corner booth," Enzo said. "We saw. Find who changed the seating chart." Dario nodded once and moved away. Enzo turned. Elena was still behind the counter, standing now, arms crossed tight over her chest. Her eyes tracked him as he moved, not with fear exactly, but with the look of someone rapidly recalculating everything they thought they understood about the last hour. She was thinking about the table. He could see it on her face. The realization arriving in pieces. She had moved him. She had put him here, near the noise and the heat and the kitchen clatter, and that decision, that small unremarkable act of quiet kindness, had kept him alive. And now she was wondering if that made her a witness. Or a suspect. He came to her. That was the part she hadn't expected, not a summons, not one of his men appearing at her elbow with a quiet word. Enzo Cavalieri himself walked to the service counter, pulled out the stool on the customer side, and sat down like a man who had nowhere else to be. Elena didn't move. "You should sit," he said. "I'm fine standing." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded, like he'd expected that answer and found it acceptable. "What's your name?" "Elena." "Elena." He said it once, like he was filing it somewhere. "I want to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly." Her jaw tightened. "Okay. Why did you move me?" She blinked. Of all the questions she had braced for, that wasn't one of them. She'd expected something harder. Something with more edges. "The corner booth had a draft," she said. "The window seal is bad. On cold nights it's uncomfortable. I thought—" She stopped, almost laughed at how small it sounded now. "I thought you'd had a rough enough night already." "I need to tell you something," he said. And I need you to stay calm when I do. She said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. I didn't make a reservation tonight. The room noise fell away. She heard the kitchen. Rain against glass. Her own breathing. The reservation under my name, I didn't make it. My office confirmed it 20 minutes ago. No call. No request. Nothing. He kept his eyes on hers. Steady. Giving her time to catch up. Which means someone created that reservation, put my name on it, and made sure I'd be placed at that specific table. Elena felt the floor shift slightly beneath her. You were set up, she said. That's what it looks like. Except the sniper didn't fire when I walked in. He didn't fire when I was shown to the door. He had a clear shot at me in the entrance, and he didn't take it. She was already ahead of him. She could feel it coming before the words arrived, the way you feel a drop in temperature before the storm actually breaks. He waited until after I moved you, she whispered. The shot wasn't meant for me, Elena. The cupcake was still on the counter beside her. One candle burned down to nothing. The other bent sideways, wax cooling on the plate. The sniper held his position for the corner booth, not for whoever sat there. That reservation was made in my name. But the target was whoever ended up at that table. He let the silence do the rest. Someone wanted you dead tonight. She laughed. It came out wrong, too sharp, too fast, and she stopped it immediately. But it had already escaped, that single fractured sound, and it said everything she hadn't meant to say out loud. That's not possible. I'm a waitress. I have a 7-year-old daughter. I take the same subway home every night, and I'm in bed by 11 because my shift starts at 6. She shook her head. Nobody wants me dead. There's nothing to want. Enzo said nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't push. He simply waited with the patience of someone who had spent a lifetime letting the truth arrive on its own schedule. I'm nobody, she said again, quieter this time. Nobody doesn't have sealed records, he replied. She gripped the edge of the counter. The way you grab something when the ground moves and you need to confirm it's still there. You had no right. Someone tried to kill you tonight in my restaurant using my name. His voice didn't rise. Didn't harden. It stayed exactly level, which was somehow worse than anger. I had every right. She wanted to walk away. She mapped the distance to the back exit in her mind the way she'd done 100 times in a different life, in a different city, when mapping exits was something she did without thinking. An old habit. She hated that it came back so easily. My ex-husband, she said finally. His name was Marcus. We were married for 4 years. He was an accountant, that's what I knew him as, that's what I married. A quiet man who was good with numbers and bad at remembering anniversaries. She paused. I found out later who his clients were. The Rinaldi family, Enzo said. She looked up sharply. He already knew. Of course he already knew. He'd probably known before he sat down. He disappeared 2 years ago. Police ruled it a robbery. Wrong place, wrong time. Case closed in 6 weeks. A short silence. He had told me the week before that he was going to do something. That he'd found something he couldn't stay quiet about, and he was going to fix it. She shook her head slowly. I told him to let it go. He didn't, Enzo said. No. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. He didn't. Enzo was quiet for a moment, then carefully. Did he leave you anything before he disappeared? Anything at all, something small, maybe. Something you didn't think twice about. She went very still. The way people go still when a question lands too close to something buried so deep they'd almost convince themselves it wasn't there. There's a flash drive, she whispered. She had never opened it. That was the first thing she told him, and she needed him to believe it the way she needed her next breath. She had never plugged it in, never held it under a light to read the label, never done anything except take it from the bottom of Marcus's coat pocket the night he didn't come home and push it to the back of her kitchen drawer, beneath takeout menus and dead batteries and all the other things she couldn't throw away but couldn't look at either. 2 years. It had been sitting there for 2 years. "Where is it now?" Enzo asked. "Home. Your daughter is with my mother tonight." She said it fast, the instinct to protect arriving before the thought was even fully formed. "She's safe. She doesn't know anything. She's 7 years old, and she doesn't know anything. She stays where she is. I'll have someone outside your mother's building within the hour." Elena opened her mouth to argue. Closed it. Because the part of her that had spent 2 years pretending everything was fine was finally, quietly, losing the argument to the part of her that had always known it wasn't. Dario appeared at Enzo's shoulder and leaned down to say something close to his ear. Enzo's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. He turned to the laptop one of his men had set up on a nearby table. Security footage. The restaurant's external cameras. Timestamped. "Watch," Dario said. The footage was clear enough. The corner booth visible through the window. The sniper's angle calculated, marked with a thin red line overlaid on the image. Enzo's entry. His conversation with the hostess. His exit into the rain. Then Elena chasing after him. Then both of them returning. The red line shifted in the analysis. Recalculated. Dario tapped the screen twice. "He didn't adjust when you moved," Dario said to Enzo. "A sniper targeting you would have followed the movement, would have recalibrated. He held position. He kept the crosshairs on table 17 and he waited." Enzo looked at Elena. She was watching the screen, her face gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that lives just on the other side of understanding something you can't ununderstand. "He was waiting for me to go back to the table," she said. "The cupcake. You went back. You were standing directly in the sight line for approximately 40 seconds. 40 seconds. She thought about the bent candle. The way she clasped her hands. The small ridiculous pride she'd felt doing something kind for a stranger on a bad night. 40 seconds from an ending she never saw coming. "The flash drive," Enzo said quietly. "Whatever Marcus found, whoever he was going to expose, they've been waiting 2 years for it to surface. They think you opened it. They think you know what's on it. But I don't. They don't know that. We need to see what's on it, Elena. Tonight." They sent 2 of his men with her. Not because she asked, she made that clear in the parking lot with the kind of quiet firmness that Enzo was beginning to recognize as simply the way she was built. But he insisted, and she didn't have the energy left to fight something reasonable, so she sat in the back of a black car that smelled like leather and cold air and watched her city pass by in the rain. Her apartment was exactly what he probably imagined it was. Small. Warm. Crayon drawings on the refrigerator. A pair of small rain boots by the door. The kind of home held together not by money but by the specific determination of someone who refused to let it fall apart. She didn't let his men pass the hallway. She went to the kitchen alone, opened the drawer, moved the takeout menus, the dead batteries, a birthday card she hadn't been able to throw away. Her fingers found it before her eyes did. Small. Black. Unremarkable. The kind of thing you'd walk past 100 times on a desk and never think about. She held it for a moment in her palm. 2 years of not knowing what was on it. 2 years of telling herself that not knowing was the same as being safe. That if she never opened it, it couldn't touch her. Couldn't touch her daughter. She brought it back to Enzo. He had his team process it at the restaurant while the police presence outside maintained the fiction that this was a standard shooting investigation. Enzo sat across from Elena at table 17, the bad table, the kitchen table, the table that had saved his life, and they waited together in a silence that had stopped being uncomfortable somewhere around the 3rd hour of the night. It took 11 minutes. The analyst, young, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who existed in Enzo's world as a ghost with a laptop, looked up from his screen and across the room at Enzo with an expression Elena couldn't fully read. Enzo could. He stood slowly. The flash drive contained transaction records. Years of them. Money moving through accounts in patterns designed to look like nothing, shell companies, layered transfers, the kind of architecture that took real sophistication to build and real courage to document. Names attached to those transactions included 2 city judges, the deputy police commissioner, and a senior official in the district attorney's office. And one more name. A name inside Enzo's own organization. He stood very still looking at the screen. The analyst said nothing. Dario said nothing. The whole room contracted around that single name like a held breath. Then Enzo turned, walked to the window, and looked out at the rain. "Where is he right now?" he said quietly. Dario checked his phone, then looked up. "That's the problem. He was here an hour ago. And now nobody can find him." His name was Caruso. 15 years. That was how long Marco Caruso had stood at Enzo's right hand. Longer than some of his men had been alive. Long enough that his presence had stopped feeling like loyalty and started feeling like furniture, just something that had always been there, solid and unremarkable, part of the architecture of the organization itself. That, Enzo understood now, was entirely the point. They found Elena first. Not Caruso himself, his people. 3 men Enzo didn't recognize, which meant they'd been kept separate, kept clean, never brought close enough to be identified. Professional distance. The kind of operational patience that takes years to build. Elena was gone from the restaurant before anyone realized she'd moved. One moment she was at table 17. The next, a door that was supposed to be locked had been opened from the inside, and she wasn't there. Enzo felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt it in his jaw first. Then his hands. They tracked her in 23 minutes, not because his men were fast, though they were, but because Caruso had wanted to be found. The location was the same restaurant. Not a back room. Not a warehouse. The main floor. Fully operational. Packed with Friday night guests who had no idea what was sitting in the corner booth. The same corner booth, the irony deliberate and precise, with a gun at Elena's side hidden beneath the tablecloth. Caruso sat across from her looking completely comfortable. Enzo walked in through the front door. The room didn't know what to do with him. A few people recognized the face. Most recognized the energy, that specific gravitational shift that happens when someone genuinely dangerous enters a space. Conversations dropped in volume. Eyes moved and then moved away quickly. Caruso smiled when he saw him. "Sit down, Enzo. You planned all of it," Enzo said. He didn't sit. He stood at the edge of the booth and kept his voice low enough that the nearest tables couldn't catch the words. "The reservation. The sniper. The flash drive leading back to me. Not to you. To your name. There's a difference." Caruso smoothed the tablecloth with one hand. "I never wanted you dead. Dead men don't stand trial. Dead men don't get perp-walked in front of cameras. I wanted you arrested. I wanted you to walk out of here in handcuffs while the whole city watched." Outside, through the window, Elena could see them now. Police. Media vans. Cameras already set up, already live, already pointed at the entrance. Caruso had tipped them off. "You were going to make me execute someone," Enzo said quietly. "In public. On camera." Caruso said nothing. Which was its own confession. "And you chose her specifically. Why her?" Caruso looked at Elena. Then back at Enzo. Something moved across his face, something almost like regret. "Because I knew what she would do to you," he said. "The moment you saw her." Enzo looked at Elena. She was composed in the way that people are composed when they have decided that falling apart is simply not an option available to them. Jaw set. Hands flat on the table. Eyes steady. A woman who had spent 2 years holding a life together with bare hands and refused to stop now just because a gun was pointed at her under a tablecloth in a restaurant full of strangers. He looked back at Caruso. "Why her?" he said again. Not a question. Caruso leaned back. The regret that had passed across his face was gone now, replaced with something older and harder. "You remember Lucia?" Caruso said. The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. Enzo felt the ripple move through him, and kept his face exactly where it was. His sister. Lucia. Dead 11 years. 26 years old when she died because of a war Enzo had started over territory that he couldn't even remember mattering anymore. Collateral, that was the word people had used. He had never forgiven himself for learning to accept it. Elena has her eyes, Caruso said quietly. Her build. The way she moves through a room like she's apologizing for taking up space and refusing to apologize at the same time. I knew the moment you saw her you wouldn't be able to think straight. And I was right. The police were at the door now. He could feel them without turning around. The media lights through the window were bright enough to throw shadows across the tablecloth. Every second he stood here was a second captured on camera. Enzo reached into his coat. The room didn't see it. But Caruso did. And Elena did. The hand beneath the tablecloth tightened. He placed the gun on the table, not aimed, not threatening, just placed it there between them, in full view of the room, the cameras, the lights, the police who had now pushed through the door and were moving toward him with the slow, careful energy of men who had been told to wait as long as possible. He looked at Caruso. 15 years. The man had carried his secrets and built his empire and stood at his shoulder through things neither of them would ever say out loud. And underneath all of it, he had been building this. Patient. Precise. Personal. Elena looked at Enzo. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. It was the same look she'd given him across a cupcake with 2 bent candles, steady, clear, asking nothing except that he be better than the moment he was standing in. He picked the gun back up and put it back inside his coat. Then he looked at the nearest camera through the window and said, loud enough to carry, I'd like to speak to the press. Caruso's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just for a second. It was enough. Chapter 10, The Wish. He walked out the front door. No handcuffs. No escort. No men closing in around him to manage the optics. Just Enzo Cavalieri stepping through a restaurant door into a wall of light and rain and camera lenses, alone, the same way he had arrived at the beginning of this night. The press didn't know what to do with that. He stopped at the top of the steps. Let them look. Let the cameras find his face, and the lights hit the rain on his coat, and the whole strange theater of it settle for a moment before he reached into his inside pocket. Not a gun. A flash drive. He held it up between 2 fingers so every camera could see it clearly. My name is Enzo Cavalieri, he said. And I have something that belongs to the people of this city. He handed it to the journalist closest to him, not a television anchor, not anyone with a network logo on their microphone, but a woman he'd had identified an hour ago, a print journalist, independent, known for the specific quality of not being owned by anyone. She took it with both hands and looked at it, and then looked at him like she was trying to decide if this was real. It was real. The flash drive contained everything. The transaction records. The judges. The deputy commissioner. The DA's office. Caruso's 15 years of careful architecture laid out in plain language with dates, amounts, and names that would be on every front page in the country by morning. He answered 4 questions from the press. No more. Then he turned and walked back inside. The arrests took 6 weeks. The trials took longer. 2 judges resigned before charges were formally filed. The deputy commissioner did not. Caruso cooperated in the end, not out of remorse, Enzo understood, but out of the same cold calculation that had driven everything else. Cooperation bought time, and time was the only currency left to him. Enzo dismantled 3 divisions of his operation quietly over the following months. Not everything. He was not a man who believed in dramatic transformations or clean slates. But enough. Enough that the city felt it. Enough that certain things stopped happening that had been happening for a long time. Elena opened the restaurant 11 months later. Small place. Good light. A menu that changed with the season and a reservation system that actually worked. She named it something simple that had nothing to do with any of this. He walked in on a Tuesday evening in October. No reservation. She looked up from behind the host stand and something moved across her face. Not surprise, not entirely. And she picked up a menu and said, I think we can find you something. She gave him a corner table this time. Good window. No draft. And when the cupcake arrived, one candle, standing straight, he leaned forward and closed his eyes. For the first time in 42 years, he made a wish. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs it tonight. And if you've made it this far without subscribing, what are you waiting for?